Welcome to Timeless Tales, History, and Folklore. I'm Dayanara, your host. If you're intrigued by tales, history, and folklore, whether imaginary or real, subscribe and press the notification bell so you'll be notified each time I upload a new video. Today, we'll be looking at the story of Adam and Eve in the first book of the Bible, Genesis. Many stories in the Bible are told, and some are said to be literal, while others are allegories. There's no way of knowing which stories are which. I did want to address the serpent who tempted Eve with the forbidden fruit from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. The purpose of the Bible is to show mankind God's character and the revelation of Him to His people. To see God's holy, faithful, gracious, and loving character, but we also see God's wrath, indignation, jealousy, and anger in how He punished those who sin and disobey His commands. Particularly how He punished Adam, Eve, the serpent, and the rest of mankind for the sin of eating the forbidden fruit. There are two creation narratives in the book of Genesis. I'll be focusing on the second one. God makes the decision to create Adam from dust, placing him in the Garden of Eden with all the animals, giving him dominion and custodianship over them. It stands to reason that creating Adam in God's likeness suggests that Adam shared similar attributes to God, such as imagination, intelligence, and reason. God allows Adam to eat from every tree except one, the tree of knowledge of good and evil. God said, "Of every tree of the garden thou mayest freely eat of it, for in the day that thou eatest thereof, thou shalt surely die." Adam remained obedient to this command. Subsequently, God creates Eve, believing that Adam shouldn't remain alone and without a companion, as none of the animals were suitable helpers. Therefore, God creates Eve from Adam's rib. Living in the Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve's innocence makes them unashamed of their nudity. A serpent pulls Eve aside and has a conversation with her. The serpent attempts to lure Eve into tasting the forbidden fruit. Eve then repeats God's prohibition against doing that. The serpent assures Eve that God will not allow her to die if she eats of the fruit, and that she will have an eye-opening experience if she does. She'd be more like God, knowing good and evil. Eve, realizing that she wants this knowledge, wanting to be more like God, sees that the fruit of the tree of knowledge is a delight, and that she wants to acquire this wisdom. So she plucks the fruit, eats it, and then offers some to Adam. By doing this, they both instantly received knowledge and noticed their nakedness. They both experienced emotions and concepts they never had before. They now understood what evil and sin was and had feelings of embarrassment and shame. God, noticing the change in their behavior and emotions, sees that Adam is now hiding in the bushes and questions his embarrassment. God asks him a rhetorical question so that Adam might consider his sin. He then admits that he's hiding out of fear and shame because he is now aware of his nakedness. God follows with two more questions in order to show his awareness of Adam and Eve's defiance to his command. Adam, realizing that God knows, points to Eve as the true offender, then tells God that God is responsible for the sin because he created Eve as his companion. God then redirects his questioning to Eve, challenging her. In turn, she shifts the blame to the serpent. It's apparent that no one wants to take responsibility for their sin and disobedience. God, enraged with Adam, Eve, and the serpent, decides to punish them. Divine pronouncement are then laid upon all three. On the serpent, God places a divine curse. Because you did this, more cursed shall you be than all the cattle and all the wild beasts. On your belly you shall crawl, and dirt you shall eat all the days of your life. To Eve he says, I will greatly multiply your pain in childbearing. In pain you shall bring forth your children, yet your desire shall be for your husband, and he shall rule over you. Adam's penalty results in God cursing the ground from which he came, receiving a death oracle. Because you have listened to the voice of your wife, and have eaten of the tree of which I commanded you, you shall not eat of it. Cursed is the ground because of you. In pain you shall eat of it all the days of your life. Thorns and thistles it shall bring forth, for you shall eat the plants of the field. By the sweat of your face you shall eat bread till you return to the ground, for out of it you were taken, for you are dust, and to dust you shall return. This event is referred to as the fall of man, or original sin. To further punish them, God expelled Adam and Eve from the Garden of Eden. The reason being to prevent them from eating from the tree of life and becoming immortal such as was God. Once exiled from the garden, God installs cherubs and the ever-turning sword to guard the entrance. Arguably, we can say that the serpent told the truth because Adam and Eve did not die as a result of eating the fruit, at least not immediately, Adam having lived 930 years. So, should the serpent be revered as a hero for giving Eve the gift of knowledge? For telling her that she had a choice in gaining this knowledge by eating the fruit so she could be more like God, even if she were to acquire it by disobeying him? Does it matter how it was done? Was it really a gift? Were it not for the serpent's temptation, would she have eaten the forbidden fruit? God, having created earth, the garden, and man, created all the animals, including the cunning serpent. God is all-knowing and understands all that he created. Did he not know that placing the serpent and the tree within reach of Adam and Eve, that they'd not succumb to eating the forbidden fruit? Was the serpent placed there to test Adam and Eve? To see if they'd obey God's command? What does this say about God? Was God jealous of his own powers? Why set up the serpent and the tree to test man in full knowledge he would give in to temptation? In his outrage, God ends up punishing Adam, Eve, the serpent, and the rest of humanity. Does our fear of snakes date back to this event and how the serpent was cursed, creating eternal animosity between himself and mankind? Or is this fear because they pose a threat to the survival of our ancestors? Perhaps it's a little of both. The role of serpents in ancient Egypt, Canaan, Mesopotamia, and Greece were depicted as symbols of evil power and chaos from the underworld. Contrarily, they were also seen as symbols of fertility, life, and healing, similar to dragons, which I addressed in my last video on dragons. I've left a link to that video in the cards. Is the serpent a villain or a hero? Is Eve? Let's look at the history of the Bible and the bias on how women have been depicted throughout history. Judaic and Christian faith are patriarchal, so women would naturally be blamed for introducing evil into the world. Throughout the Bible, women are regarded as spiritually unclean. Women were rarely presented as role models. The Bible also tells us that it was less desirable to have a female child over a male. Many interesting women exist playing prominent roles in biblical history, but are rarely mentioned or talked about at all. The story of Adam and Eve must have Eve being the one who committed original sin, entering our world, while man is sexually tempted by women. Eve has always been blamed for the fall of man. Christian writer Tertullian decreed women as the devil's gateway, one of many sexist statements to further disempower and marginalize the role of women. There is a pattern of gender inequality with women being undervalued and viewed as untrustworthy. One can see that the moral of the story of Adam and Eve is to warn men, and especially women, to never disobey God or his elders, or there will be a heavy price to pay. Another point of the story is that we all want knowledge. When looking at children, they continually ask us how, why, what, and when. Girls naturally mature faster and are more curious than boys, while also being more intuitive, so a woman wants to acquire knowledge before man. Could the moral of the story be that we will do anything, even sin against God, in order to learn and acquire knowledge? Does this make Eve a hero, or is the serpent the hero? Is wanting knowledge wrong? Isn't it natural for healthy human beings to be curious, wanting to know and understand things? The circumstances of the story lead to Adam and Eve's demise, but was it worth it? We have to consider all of this. I believe that the story of Adam and Eve is an allegory and serves to warn men and women that disobeying God and giving into temptation through sin, that they have to face the consequences of those actions. We must not forget that in religions that are patriarchal, manipulation has always been used in order to keep men in positions of authority and women disempowered. Whoever writes history can control our perceptions and beliefs and how we feel about ourselves, others, and the opposite sex. The stories of the Bible in relation to God have remained relevant to a certain extent, but do we really know the truth? With so many edits and the removal of certain books, multiple changes, what do we really know? It is obvious that there is sexual bias when reading through the Bible in both the Old and New Testament. The men who wrote the stories of the Bible would have you believe that God is a psychopathic, controlling spiritual being who lashes out to those who don't obey his commands and sin against him. These written transcripts illustrate a need for control and what you should believe about men and women and how their roles affect society as a result of original sin. With all the information that's now available, it's hard to believe in this Abrahamic version of God. Many believe that God is all loving, nurturing, understanding, and gives us free will, seeing men and women as equals. He allows us to experience life, make mistakes, learn, and all that comes with that. In spite of the story of Adam and Eve being an allegory, as a means to blame women for the human condition, I do not believe that men were created first, and I'm certain that I will be able to expound upon that in a future video. It's difficult to believe that with all we know today about human physiology. Perhaps our perception of God is projected into our reality because of what we expect and believe. Maybe there was a time when all people believed in this terrifying, wrathful God, and because of this, they experienced God as such. We must keep in mind that this representation of the God of the Bible has turned people off and away from him. Many don't believe in a God at all. The mind is very powerful, and can create certain ideologies based on your beliefs and upbringing. I think that with human evolution through the centuries in gaining wisdom, we start to see that things are not as we were told. That as knowledge and more information becomes available, we start to unearth certain truths and adjust to what we've learned. There are so many opinions and interpretations on the story of Adam and Eve. Has God evolved to gain favor from his people? Or have people evolved because of what their understanding of what God truly is? Who do you think is the hero? Is it the serpent? Is it Eve or is it God? Perhaps there is none. What do you think is the moral of the story? Please comment down below. If you thought this was thought-provoking and enjoyed this video and found it interesting, please give it a thumbs up and thank you for watching.